The Pictorial Key to the Tarot, Arthur Edward Waite, originally published in 1910. Being fragments of a secret tradition under the veil of divination. It seems rather of necessity than predilection in the sense of apologia that I should put on record in the first place a plain statement of my personal position, as one who for many years of literary life has been, subject to his spiritual and other limitations, an exponent of the higher mystic schools. It will be thought that I am acting strangely in concerning myself at this day with what appears at first sight, and simply, a well-known method of fortune-telling. Now, the opinions of Mr. Smith, even in the literary reviews, are of no importance unless they happen to agree with our own. But in order to sanctify this doctrine, we must take care that our opinions, and the subjects out of which they arise, are concerned only with the highest. Yet, it is just this which may seem doubtful in the present instance, not only to Mr. Smith, whom I respect within the proper measures of detachment, but to some more real consequence, seeing that their dedications are mine. To these, and to any, I would say that after the most illuminated Frater Christian Rosy Cross had beheld the chemical marriage in the secret palace of transmutation, his story breaks off abruptly, with an intimation that he expected next morning to be a doorkeeper. After the same manner, it happens more often than might seem likely, that those who have seen the King of Heaven through the most clearest veils of the sacrament are those who assume thereafter the humblest offices of all about the house of God. By such simple devices are also the adepts and great masters in the secret orders distinguished from the cohort of neophytes, as servi servorum mysterii. So also, or in a way which is not entirely unlike, we meet with the tarot cards at the outermost gates, amidst the fritterings and debris of so-called occult arts, about which no one in their senses has suffered the smallest deception. And yet these cards belong in themselves to another region, for they contain a very high symbolism, which is interpreted according to the laws of grace, rather than by the pretexts and intuitions of that which passes for divination. The fact that the wisdom of God is foolishness with men does not create a presumption that the foolishness of this world makes in any sense for divine wisdom. So neither the scholars in the ordinary classes, nor the pedagogues in the seats of the mighty, will be quick to perceive the likelihood or even the possibility of this proposition. The subject has been in the hands of cartomancists as part of the stock and trade of their industry. I do not seek to persuade anyone outside my own circles that this is much of, or of no consequence. But on the historical and interpretive sides, it has not fared better. It has been there in the hands of exponents who have brought it into utter contempt for those people who possess philosophical insight or faculties for the appreciation of evidence. It is time that it should be rescued, and this I propose to undertake once and for all, that I may have done with the side issues which distract from the term. As poetry is the most beautiful expression of the things that are of all most beautiful, so is symbolism the most Catholic expression and concealment of the things that are most profound in the sanctuary, and that have not been declared outside of it with the same fullness by means of the spoken word. The justification of the rule of silence is no part of my present concern, but I have put on record elsewhere, and quite recently, what is possible to say on the subject. The little treatise that follows is divided into 3 parts, in the first of which I have dealt with the antiquities of the subject, and a few things that arise from and connect therewith. It should be understood that it is not put forward as a contribution to the history of playing cards, about which I know and care nothing. It is a consideration dedicated and addressed to a certain school of occultism, more especially in France, as to the source and center of all the phantasmagoria which has entered into expression during the last 50 years under the pretense of considering tarot cards historically. In the second part, I have dealt with the symbolism according to some of its higher aspects, and this also serves to introduce the complete and rectified tarot, which is available separately in the form of colored cards, the designs of which are added to the present text in black and white. They have been prepared under my supervision in respect to the attributions and meanings by a lady who has high claims as an artist. Regarding the divinatory part, by which my thesis is terminated, I consider it personally as a fact in the history of the tarot. As such, I have drawn from all published sources a harmony of meanings which have been attached to the various cards, and I have given prominence to one method of working that has not been published previously. Having the merit of simplicity, while it is also of universal application, it may be held to replace the cumbrous and involved systems of the larger handbooks. The Veil and its Symbols. Section 1. Introductory and General. The pathology of the poet says that the undevout astronomer is mad. The pathology of the very plain man says the genius is mad. And between these extremes, which stand for 10,000 analogous excesses, the sovereign reason takes the part of a moderator and does what it can. I do not think that there is a pathology of the occult dedications, but about their extravagances no one can question, and it is not less difficult than thankless to act as a moderator regarding them. Moreover, the pathology, if it existed, would probably be an empiricism rather than a diagnosis, and would offer no criterion. Now, occultism is not like mystic faculty, and it very seldom works in harmony either with business aptitude in the things of ordinary life, or with a knowledge of the canons of evidence in its own sphere. I know that for the high art of ribaldry, there are few things more dull than the criticism which maintains that a thesis is untrue, and cannot understand that it is decorative. I know also that after long dealing with doubtful doctrine, or with difficult research, it is always refreshing, in the domain of this art, to meet with what is obviously a fraud, or at least of complete unreason. But the aspects of history, as seen through the lens of occultism, are not, as a rule, decorative, and have few gifts of refreshment to heal the lacerations which they inflict on the logical understanding. It almost requires a Frater Sapiens Dolmen, Abitur Astris, in the Fellowship of the Rosy Cross, to have the patience which is not lost amidst clouds of folly, when the consideration of tarot is undertaken in accordance with the higher level of symbolism. The true tarot is symbolism. It speaks no other language, and offers no other signs. Given the inward meaning of its emblems, they do become a kind of alphabet which is capable of indefinite combinations, and makes true sense in all. On the highest plane it offers a key to the mysteries, in a manner which is not arbitrary and has not been read in. But the wrong symbolical stories have been told concerning it, and the wrong history has been given in every published work which so far has dealt with the subject. It has been intimated by 2 or 3 writers that at least in respect of the meanings this is unavoidably the case, because few are acquainted with them, while these few hold by transmission under pledges, and cannot betray their trust. The suggestion is fantastic on the surface, for there seems to be a certain anticlimax in the proposition that a particular interpretation of fortune-telling, l'art de tirer la carte, can be reserved for the sons of the doctrine. The fact remains, notwithstanding, that a secret tradition exists regarding the tarot, and as there is always the possibility that some minor arcana of the mysteries may be made public with the flourish of trumpets, it will be as well to go before the event, and to warn those who are curious in such matters that any revelation will contain only a 3rd part of the earth and sea, and a 3rd part of the stars of heaven in respect of the symbolism. This is for the simple reason that neither in root matter nor in development has more been put into writing, so that much will remain to be said after any pretended unveiling. The guardians of certain temples of initiation, who keep watch over mysteries of this order, have therefore no cause for alarm. In my preface to the Tarot of the Bohemians, which, rather by an accident of things, has recently come to be reissued after a long period, I have said what was then possible or seemed most necessary. The present work is designed more especially, as I have intimated, to introduce a rectified set of cards themselves, and to tell the unadorned truth concerning them, so far as this is possible in the outer circles. As regards the sequence of greater symbols, their ultimate and highest meaning lies deeper than the common language of picture or hieroglyph. This will be understood by those who have received some part of the secret tradition. As regards the verbal meanings allocated here to the more important trump cards, they are designed to set aside the follies and impostures of past attributions, to put those who have the gift of insight on the right track, and to take care, within the limits of my possibilities, that they are the truth so far as they go. It is regrettable in certain respects that I must confess to certain reservations, but there is a question of honor at issue. Furthermore, between the follies on the one side of those who know nothing of the tradition, yet are in their own opinion the exponents of something called occult science and philosophy, and on the other side between the make-believe of a few writers who have received part of the tradition and think that it constitutes a legal title to scatter dust in the eyes of the world without, I feel that the time has come to say what it is possible to say, so that the effect of current charlatanism and unintelligence may be reduced to a minimum. We shall see in due course that the history of tarot cards is largely of a negative kind, and that, when the issues are cleared by the dissipation of reveries and gratuitous speculations expressed in terms of certitude, there is in fact no history prior to the 14th century. The deception and self-deception regarding their origin in Egypt, India, or China put a lying spirit into the mouths of the first expositors, and the later occult writers have done little more than reproduce the first false testimony in the good faith of an intelligence unawakened to the issues of research. As it so happens, all expositions have worked within a very narrow range, and owe, comparatively speaking, little to the invented faculty. One brilliant opportunity has at least been missed, for it has not so far occurred to anyone that the tarot might perhaps have done duty and even originated as a secret symbolical language of the Albigensian sects. I commend the suggestion to the lineal descendants in the spirit of Gabriele Rossetti and Eugene Roux, to Mr. Harold Bailey as another new light on the Renaissance, and as a taper, at least in the darkness, which, with great respect, might be serviceable to the zealous and all-searching mind of Mrs. Cooper Oakley. Think only what the supposed testimony of watermarks and paper might gain from the tarot card of the Pope or Hierophant, in connection with the notion of a secret Albigensian patriarch, of which Mr. Bailey has found in these same watermarks so much material to his purpose. Think only for a moment about the card of the High Priestess as representing the Albigensian Church itself, and think of the tower struck by lightning as typifying the desired destruction of Papal Rome, the city on the 7 hills, with the pontiff and his temporal power cast down from the spiritual edifice when it is riven by the wrath of God. The possibilities are so numerous and persuasive that they almost deceive in their expression one of the elect who has invented them. But there is more even than this, though I scarcely dare to cite it. When the time came for the tarot cards to be the subject of their first formal explanation, the archaeologist Corte Gebelin reproduced some of their most important emblems, and, if I so may term it, the codex which he used has served, by means of his engraved plates, as the basis of reference for many sets that have been issued subsequently. The figures are very primitive and differ as such from the cards of Italia, the Marseille Tarot, and others still current in France. I am not a good judge in such matters, but the fact that every one of the trumps major might have answered for watermark purposes is shown by the cases which I have quoted, and by one most remarkable example of the Ace of Cups. I should call it a Eucharistic emblem after the manner of a ciborium, but this does not signify at the moment. The point is that Mr. Harold Bailey gives 6 analogous devices in his new light on the Renaissance, being watermarks on paper of the 17th century, which he claims to be of Albigensian origin and to represent sacramental and Graal emblems. Had he only heard of the tarot, had he known that these cards of divination, cards of fortune, cards of all vagrant arts, were perhaps current at the period in the south of France, I think that his enchanting but all too fantastic hypothesis might have dilated still more largely in the atmosphere of his dream. we should no doubt have had a vision of Christian Gnosticism, Manichaeanism, and all that he understands by pure primitive gospel shining behind the pictures. I do not look through such glasses, and I can only commend the subject to his attention at a later period. It is mentioned here that I may introduce with an unheard of wonder the marvels of arbitrary speculation as to the history of the cards. With reference to their form and number, it should scarcely be necessary to enumerate them, for they must be almost commonly familiar. But as it is precarious to assume anything, and as there are also other reasons, I will tabulate them as follows.